the end of my last two videos.
Yeah, I've been, just hanging out, sitting here. I lost my robe for one, and I was sleeping through the other. I wouldn't worry about it, Figured, if you really wanted my help, you'd come find me.
Well, as long as you're alright. You are a part of me, so...
I may have also lost your phone number, and, if I could have that, just we can keep in touch in case you want to do my idea.
I still don't need your idea, but I appreciate it.
I'm still sitting here, so... No? Alright.
The last time I spoke of this film, Bionicle, Mask of Light, was in my previous movie review series, Critical Critiques. The Mask of Nostalgia was not the only mask I was wearing. I was also wearing the Mask of Pretentiousness. And some might argue I'm still wearing that mask, but at least I'm having more fun with the series, and I'm actually watching the films before trying to write a review of them. And I didn't really write a review so much as just tried for 5 minutes to pull in anything I could remember and talk about it in any kind of capacity. I didn't write anything down. I had no notes. I had no focus. But that's more about the problems of that series and less of the actual film itself. I have a lot of history with this film, as I saw it when I was a kid, right around the time when it came out, and I loved it then. I had the Bionicles. I loved building with Legos and all the other things that come along with that. And so when this movie came out, it was a big deal for me. And watching it again, I still love this movie. It's it still has the same fun, awesome feelings of just this world is so big and the characters, they're not like you and I or people that you know or even heroes that you see in Marvel movies or anything. It's these are specifically people of their world. This is how their world works. It is very obvious that this is following the ideas behind, the team of Bionicle. This is a movie made by them for their fans. So as I said, when this movie came out, this blew our minds. The characters looked cool. They had the voices that we not necessarily we all imagined, but it's at least when I first saw it, these were the voices I would picture them having. And it's everyone felt in character, the way everyone acted felt the way they did in the comics. And I just felt everything about the way they presented the characters in the world was how I imagined it before seeing this movie. And when you saw the Toa and everyone else had fingers that actually moved and stuff, it's because back when this movie came out, the only hands that the Toa had were just the regular little brick. It's it didn't do anything. They could hold weapons in their hands, but it's they didn't have hands. And then so you see that in the first scenes of the Jala and the Takua, they have fingers, and then here comes Tahu riding in on his lava surfboard, and he's got fingers and hands, and you're just whoa! It blew our little minds. We were oh my god, they have fingers. However, the animation really shows its age. It, like I said, it was really good when it came out, but now it just really shows its age. It's it's very slow in some places. It's very stiff and awkwardly moving in some places. It feels it kind of lacks some flow. And again, they were doing what they could with the technology and the budget they had. The other thing that I noticed with this viewing and the animation is that there are certain areas where it's the scale is really out of whack, like the old Transformers, where it's the sound wave would be the size of a giant robot and then transform into a little tape deck, It's kind of stuff like that, where there's one scene in particular where our main characters are running across a bridge to the Coliseum to play, like, the opening, like, game that becomes relevant later. And, like, you see the stadium full of people, and the people are all, like, little tiny specks. And then there's this huge door that, like, takes up most of the side of the Coliseum, and then our characters are full size, like, running at it. It's like, it just looks so, like, it's like a perspective thing, but it looks really weird. It looks like they're, like, giants running toward this, like, really tiny Coliseum with a huge door. It's just it's like stuff like that, where it's like that happens throughout the movie. And that's just because the animation hasn't aged well, and if, like, it was redone and you could, like, it would look way better, and it's like I can only imagine what it would look like nowadays. So I just gotta say it's very obvious who the mask wants to be, like, its wielder. It's so obvious. It only lights up when Takua touches the mask. It's like anyone could, and obviously this is a film made for children, but it's like anyone could see that he is the person who's supposed to be wielding the mask, and that he's gonna be the one, like, they even have a line in the film where it's like they go all over the island just to end up, like, basically, like, down the street from where they originally started, and they're like, I don't get it, we've been everywhere, why did we end up here? And then Jala's like, oh, well, this is, like, the really sacred grounds, of course we ended up here. And then, but, like, Takua's, like, not convinced. He's like, well, why didn't you just take us here to begin with? Because he doesn't realize that it wasn't about, like, how far you traveled, because, like I said, it was basically just, like, down the street. It's more about, like, the personal journey he had, and him being afraid and having to go back to save his friend, because he realizes that that's not his destiny, it was his, and he was being afraid, and he's like, no, I have to face this. So as I alluded to earlier, I really liked how the Toa were in this movie, because when we think of superheroes in our world, we think of stuff like Batman and Superman and the Avengers and all these different superheroes. But in the Bionicle universe, the Toa are these superheroes. They're like these beings that came from, like, the sky, from their god, who has the ability to fight the dark forces that they couldn't fight on their own. And it's cool because despite being only 6 of them, and then at the end of the film 7, they still take the time to, like, learn everyone's name, learn what everyone does, help out part of the community. It's like they know everyone. They take the time to, like, get to know people that they're saving. It's like Superman may, like, learn a couple of people's names that he saved, but it's like for the most part, Superman is just, he saves you and he flies off. That's the end of it. Where in this, it's like in the first scene you see Takua is like gets saved by Tahu, and he's like immediately like, hey, out here again, huh? And it's like, these guys know each other. They've had a history together. Speaking of the little, like, way they work together, the other tribes respect all of the Toa equally. It's like, yes, the, fire tribe have Tahu, and the water tribe have Gali, and, so on. But it's like, when the fire tribe sees Gali approaching, they don't, like, be like, whoa, what are you supposed to, no, get Tahu. No, they're like, the Toa of Water's here, we gotta do something about this. They just listen to her right away because she's a Toa. She knows what's going on. And in among the Toa, the way they interact with each other is really cool. Because despite Tahu and Gali fighting at the beginning of the film and having a little bit of a rivalry, you can see that they put aside their differences as soon as it's time to act. Because it's like I said, Gali came in to warn them that, like, the city was about to be under attack. And when it is under attack, they drop their squabbles, and it's like, we gotta protect our citizens. It doesn't matter what our creative differences are here. We have to go. And they do. They go right into action. So the main, like, enemies of this little movie are these creatures called the Rakshi. And when they are introduced, they are actually very intimidating. Makuta is the Lord of Darkness and, like, very bad, obviously. And he is intimidating, too. But just the way the Rakshi, like, move and sound, and it's like you know that they're, like, a real threat. And when you see them, they go, like, you know, they do terrorize a little bit, but it's like, for the most part, they're pretty focused on their task. But they are, like, legitimately intimidating. I remember when I was a kid, they were pretty scary. I was like, whoa, it's a good thing the Toa are here. But now that I'm an adult, I'm looking back on it and whatnot, because of the fast-pacedness of the movie, and because they had to make it so that the conflict didn't end in the first 10 seconds or whatever, I feel like the Rakshi, for being as powerful as they were built up to be, that they could take down the Toa so quickly, I feel like they could have done a lot more, but they end up just kind of slowly, like, walking after our hero, like, hey, I'm gonna get you. You got up an elevator shaft. I'll get you next time. And it's like, I really think these vicious killing machines could do way more damage. I feel like they could have done more. It's like they could have been more menacing and be like an actual threat. But because it's a, like, low budget or whatever was the situation when this happened, it was very obvious that, like, they didn't want the conflict to be over so quickly. Because it's like, you can't have them so powerful that they kill the Toa, because then it's like, whoa, well then who's going to come back at the end? And you can't have them so weak that the Toa can beat them, because then it's like, well then they're not a real threat. But then it's like, you can't have them beat the Toa, but then go and get, like, the mask, because it's like, well then the movie's over. So it was a very interesting thing that I'd never thought about as a kid, but it had become very apparent to me as an adult. Whether it's your destiny to fight Makuta by yourself or not, you really should have some backup. I mean, there is no reason in the world why you couldn't have all 7 Toa go in to fight Makuta and have this big, awesome fight, except for the fact that the team behind it probably didn't want to animate that, for one, and 2, they were like, well, he's the hero. We've waited all movie for Takanuva to come out and shine and be the hero, so we can't have the other heroes there anymore. And with that, like, in mind, I noticed that, like, the other Toa, like, they just kind of stand around for most of the fight. Like, when they're up above the circle, they're kind of waiting for him to come back. But then when they go down into the tunnels to, like, go awaken Matt and Nui, there's, like, Makuta is still fighting Takanuva, and it's like, they just kind of stand around. They're like, yep, here we are. And interestingly enough, I was saying earlier how I loved how, like, they interact with the other characters, and they're like, they are, like, these heroes of the community. They know everyone's name and everything. When they're getting attacked, like, Makuta's throwing things and, like, the roof is collapsing on top of them multiple times, all of the Toa just, like, kind of run off, leaving the elders just, slowly, like, coming after them, like, with their weird walk animations. And it's just like, hey, guys, maybe use your, like, superpowers to pick up these old people so they don't get crushed by rocks. It was just kind of funny. Just, like, you never, like, think about that as a kid, but you're like, yeah, why didn't they do that? Or then, like, when, they fuse together, Makuta and Takanuva fuse together, and he's, like, lifting the big door by himself, the other Toa just kind of run in after. It's like, old people still, like, waddling in after us, and this guy's holding the door by himself. It's just like, it's not my destiny to hold that door. It's his. At the end, I still love this film. It's got a special place in my heart from not only it being a large portion of my childhood, but just being a pretty enjoyable film on its own. Obviously, they don't take a lot of time to introduce you to the Toa and, like, their names and all the characters and the world that they're in. They have a little bit of exposition in the beginning, but it's a 70-minute movie, so they gotta move this thing right along. But I still really liked it, and I still thought it was a good film, especially for what it was. It could have been a lot worse. I would really love to see like an updated version of this movie, like better animation, maybe give it a little bit more of a runtime instead of its 70 minutes, maybe give it a not necessarily like a full another hour, because it's like there's just some parts that felt really rushed. Most of the parts that like weren't rushed felt like they were about the right chunk of time, so it's like maybe just stretch out those pieces that felt a little rushed and maybe give them like 90 minutes or something, like a couple extra half hour to just tell a little bit more of a concise story. You could like because the voice work is really great. It's like I felt like when I was listening to this that these were a lot of voices I've heard before, so I don't think you have to worry about that. It's just I wanted more of this world. It's like one of those, all right, we've seen the little tiny hole in the wall, let's get to the other side and see what's actually on there. I really think if you gave this movie just gave it what it needed to be, this movie would have been could be really good today. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And the next movie I will be reviewing is Spider-Man: Homecoming. I love Spider-Man, and I really enjoyed that movie when it came out, so I look forward to reviewing it. Until then, take care.
Well, it sounds like he's wrapping up the video again. Maybe I should try to get this phone number from him. Nah,